Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Wake Before the Day podcast. You got Clark and Bobby in the studio, and this is the 5th podcast, but we're looking at part 4, specifically dealing with the Bible and creation. Yeah. And kind of the overarching line is Jesus riding a dinosaur, and do we have to choose between science and the Bible?
Yeah.
Yeah, the answer is no. But
yeah, loaded few chapters for you guys.
We're excited to dive into it, yeah.
I know. So this is dealing with chapters 10, 11, and 12, starting on page 153. And as Clark and I kind of walk through it, as you notice through the book, if you've been following along since the beginning, Dan, the way that he writes is like the intro to the section, like the first chapter, is kind of a lot of setting up where he's going. So it's like
a story or something like that.
Yes, a story or like, you know, what are some of the arguments or what are some of the things you might see like out in the world today? And so that's why some of the time we don't spend a lot of time, like this time we're not going to spend a lot on chapter 10. So he kind of just helps you understand with a story a little bit about, you know, why is there pushback? And, you know, that question on page 155, if I can't believe in science, then if I can't believe in science, then I can't believe in the Bible anymore. And really, you know, why does it seem like there's this like either or conversation with the Bible and Christianity and kind of laying out a little bit of like, oh, a rib woman, like talking snake, dinosaur, and Jesus.
I get it. Some of them it's hard to understand. Get your head around some of these things. So,
so that's helpful, and it's good to kind of understand the whole like argument a little bit. But then we're going to jump into chapter 11. So, was there anything else you wanted from chapter 10?
I think we were going to talk about the importance of language and how God's trying to communicate to us. And he's infinite, and he has to limit himself to help us understand.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so I think you're going to share a story about, you know, communicating to the kiddos. And like, how is that? That's hard. That's hard to do when you're like, God's who's huge and infinite and unending, trying to make himself known to us.
And that's kind of the beginning. So in chapter 11, when he says in the beginning, we misunderstood, and he has that quote, you know, about the original audience. And as we kind of process that a little bit, a lot of it came to our mind with like, you know, if we're an infinite being, if we're like God and our kids are like us, you know, what does that conversation even look like just day to day? And so we thought of like trying to describe like the relationship of food in our body because
they ask us about it like,
all the time.
Where does this go?
Even when they go potty, like, what is this? Like, why is this coming out of me? Like, this is good. This is a good question. And so, you know, Clark and I, we could understand and tell them about like how, you know, how there's specific nutrients and vitamins and minerals in the food that we eat. And then as we ingest them, like we start this process of peristalsis in our gut and how it's in those, you know, major organs. Like we could go to those lengths and help them understand, but is that really going to help them understand? No, it's not. And so it's just helping them in their own language understand like, oh, when I eat this strawberry, it tastes good to me. And that's good because strawberries support my body and they help me grow and they help me be strong. Yeah. And then when I go potty, that's what's left of my strawberry. Yeah. And so,
we kind of told my gasoline to a car, like you put gas in a car to help the car go. And so food helps your body have energy.
Yes. And so there's specific language that we're using, you know, for their understanding and their context to help them understand like their specific question. Yeah. And that's what we see as we kind of walked through these chapters too, is Genesis is written. Actually, you guys, when was Genesis written? Like if you, a listener, are listening right now, you might have a preconceived thought about the book of Genesis being the very first book. Like when do you think it was written?
Yeah. You thought about it? I mean, it's actually, Job is the oldest book in the Bible, and Genesis was not written and read until after God's people left Egypt. So that is really important to have in your mind because that changes the questions that were being asked. Totally. And the answers that were being provided. And that's very different than the questions we ask in 2021. Yeah. So if you look at 160, you know, here are some of the hot topics when it comes to, you know, Genesis. Like, hey, how long did it take to create? And how old is the earth? And what is the earth and sun sequence of creation? And how about evolution? Where does that fit in all this? And always dinosaurs. We're going to end the conversation talking about dinosaurs. Dinosaurs, where do they fit into this? And so these, I think these different topics carry different amounts of weight. Yeah. Some of them are major, some of them are minor. And which hill is worth dying on?
Yeah,
and
what do you mean? Yeah.
Well, we'll unpack it in the next couple of chapters, but some of these things, going back to what was the author trying to get at when they wrote to the people as they left Egypt, and how does this help us understand who God is revealing himself to be?
Yeah.
That's primary. That's a major.
Yes.
Right? There are other things that are, I would say, minor, that aren't worth fighting about because they don't change who God is or change his message to us about Jesus or sin and redemption.
Yeah.
So we'll unpack it as we keep going. But like Bobby said, he brings up multiple times this question: what did Genesis mean to the original author and its original readers? It's hard to fight against the grain because we're going, what does this mean for us today? And I want to analyze it scientifically, but if we can get there, it's going to be really helpful unpacking this. And I think our eyes might even be open. The Spirit might allow us to come to love this even more. And so
one of the things I love too that Dan does, like, and when you get to like 162, 163, is that where you're at, Clark?
Yeah.
You kind of just talked
around.
Anyway, he continues to present those, like, why, what does Genesis mean to the original author and the original readers? And so that's a question he continues to come back to on the top of page 163. And like, why that's important and like why that's okay on the bottom of 163 is not because there's mistrust, is not because they're like, like, oh, what are you guys doing questioning this 3,000-year-old book? And we're like, no, first of all, the Bible can stand, and God, Yahweh, can stand a little question. So like, let's ask these questions and let's understand these things, because we want to be diligent students.
Yeah.
We want to have like, I don't want to say like we want to have answers to these questions, because there's still going to be a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But we do want to do our due diligence and say, no, we respect and love this text so much that we want to devote like study and, our mental energy to understanding it as best as we can.
So he kind of, fleshes it out a little bit more on the bottom of 165, saying the people were surrounded by the Egyptian culture for 400 years.
Yes.
So many gods, many deities, the god of the sun, the god of the cattle, the god of the water, the god of the land. And they're surrounded by this. And so if you flip to then 166, he starts breaking down how Genesis was written to the Israelites after they had lived in the land and worshiped many gods. The author was trying to remind them who the one true God was. And so for me, I just remember being in college and being in seminary, and then in some of the classes having to read some of the Mesopotamian accounts of the Enuma Elish or Gilgamesh. And maybe this sounds like foreign language to you. These are other creation accounts. That are eerily similar to the Bible. And I remember reading this going, this sounds so much like the creation account, or so much like Noah's Ark, but a little more violent, a little more sexual. What am I supposed to do with this? And really what was happening was there were many different creation accounts coming out of Egypt from that land in that time, talking about how the gods waged war and how they're having tons of sex and then fertilizing the ground. And so out of that, God is, again, using language that the people would know to communicate who the one true God is. And like how he created, and more so why. So that's why if you go through the book of Exodus, there's the plagues. All those plagues, many scholars think, were targeted at Egyptian gods. Going, you're the god of the Nile, check, Yahweh stronger. The god of cattle, check, Yahweh stronger. The god of light and darkness, check, Yahweh stronger. Going, this is not even a battle here. Like he is so much stronger than you. And so they didn't have a Bible, so he's telling them who they are. So, and
that's a good way to frame kind of like, okay, so if we put ourselves in the shoes of these Israelites who have been in captivity, who have been under Egyptian rule for hundreds of years, we're confused. We probably have intermingled like thoughts and gray areas about, who's the God we worship? Oh wait, what about the Egyptian gods? And so Dan kind of lays out like, okay, what were the likely questions that the Israelites had during that time when Moses was writing Genesis, when Holy Spirit was inspiring, because let's not lose that, like Genesis and the whole Pentateuch is inspired and totally relevant. Yes, it was to the Israelites at the time. So what were some of those questions? This is the top of page 168. And he goes through and just kind of lists like some potential, like, are we really going to survive out here in the desert? Are we safe here? Is there really only one God? You know, what about all of these pagan gods? What about all the Egyptian gods? Is this God who rescued us still here? Like, are we alone? And he just keeps kind of marching down, you know, should we worship the sun? Is the Egyptian story of how the world was made the true one? Yeah. And so I love, we could dive into all that and really spend time there. But I love, because right on page 169, then you see like, oh, well, those aren't the questions we asked.
Let's compare that to the questions that are being fought over in the church in 2021.
Exactly.
How old is the earth? Is it 6,000 years or 6 billion years? So,
I know.
Was it 6 literal 24-hour days or 6 long periods of time that God made everything? Does the lack of major transitional forms in the fossil records disprove evolution? Could primitive nucleic acids, amino acids, and other building blocks of life have formed and organized themselves into self-replicating, self-sustaining units, laying the foundation for cellular biochemistry?
I think that one a lot.
Was there? Yeah, that's what I fall asleep thinking every night. Was there really a talking snake? Were there dinosaurs on Noah's Ark? If God created Adam as the first person, did he have a belly button? Like, so some of those questions are valid. You can wrestle with them and ask them. But the point is do you think the people who just ran through the Red Sea, sprinted away from Pharaoh, were asking those questions?
Right.
And there actually is a clear answer, and is no. That was not in the forefront of their minds. And that was not why God was writing. It doesn't mean we can't answer some of those things or come to conclusions about what we most likely think, but that's not the purpose of it. And when we can settle on that, that becomes so incredibly freeing.
Yeah.
When you read the account. And so if you flip over to 170, he breaks down then what do we learn about God?
Yep.
It says God wanted the people to know he is the one and true God.
Yep.
He is over and above all these Egyptian gods or demons. God wanted Israel to know that his presence was with them, not only through Egypt, and then the fire and the cloud guiding them, but also at the very beginning of time, right? God wanted the Israelites to know he created the heavens and the earth and all that existed. And that he was different from the Egyptian creation accounts like Gilgamesh and the Enuma-Elish. God wanted the Israelites to know he's a true God, and he's slow to anger, and he's compassionate and love, because that, again, contrasts greatly with the other creation accounts. If you displease the gods, and you're up a creek. So his encouragement to us again is even in this, remember what the author's trying to target, but also trying to have an infinite God comprehend or communicate to a finite, limited, slow to learn group of people. Like, I'm not going to go talk to my kids about he's proto-analysis, synthesis. I don't know what word you said. It's a big fancy word for digestion.
Peristalsis.
Peristalsis. That's the word.
Yeah.
Or Hebrew or algebra. We're going to communicate the most important things in ways that they understand.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And so that's kind of what Dan continues to is like the how the audience understood the world around them. And so he just continues to lay out how God was speaking to people, yes, using the language that they would know and understand, but even using the worldview that they would know and understand. And so we're not going to go into, I think he talks about, is this where he talks about,
this chapter gets into the different tiers of heaven and earth. We're not going to dive into that necessarily, but
so another example though that we kind of dialogued about was like other examples of God, using specific types of language or an action to speak to his people, and that like one of the ways that we've learned about just through the past is during Christmas time when we learned about the Magi and how literally, these were dudes that would study the stars and use, astronomy, astrology to.
It's a good example.
And how did God come to them? He didn't come to them first in a scroll maybe, but in a star. Yeah. And that's how they noticed him. And then the language. Same, even in the coming of Jesus, like all the way to earth, God humbling himself. Anyway, and so those are all examples of
I think one of the other things I'd add to this too is just remember that this is a spirit realm interacting with a physical earthly realm, and that there's a war taking place at this time and right now. There's a battle. And so the greatest way for there to be more confusion when it comes to creation, Bible, truth is not to make it black and white, but to add a lot of gray. and for there to be different creation accounts that are kind of similar to maybe what was real.
Sure.
Or other religions that sound a lot like Christianity, but actually have different values and a different heart to the bottom. So yeah, I was just mindful of that too as we're reading this, is there's still the kingdom of God, which we're reading about, coming to battle with a kingdom of the world,
Yeah,
statement.
Dan makes that distinction too on page 173 when he, we'll jump to chapter 12, but he just says, like, first we need to know that the pre-existence of, these other creation stories, so the Egyptian stories and stuff, that doesn't mean that Moses simply copied and adapted these stories. God used what the people were familiar with to communicate the true creation story and to communicate the true God.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he wanted to make sure that they got the point with, like, okay, I know you guys get this, so let me speak your language.
Yeah. So you want to flip over to chapter 12?
Sure.
No? Okay. So this, hopping over to chapter 12, begins on 183, and I believe we'll go to like 186 because he starts diving into some of the specifics with the different creation accounts and creation account theories and like, what do you think? And one of the biggest things when it comes to the biblical accounts and understanding like who God is and who we are is on 186, it talks about how in the beginning God created everything, and he talks about that word create, which translated in Hebrew is bara.
Yeah.
And in that, it talks about the concept of making and also determining the function for that which was made. And so one of the questions that will often come up is, who created God?
Sure.
It's a little philosophical, but I want to talk about it because I think a lot of people ask this question. No matter whether you believe in the Bible or you have a secular view, fewer and fewer scientists hold to the fact that something came from nothing.
Sure, like the Big Bang kind of idea.
Yeah, that kind of idea. It doesn't make sense. There's no logic. There's no other evidence anywhere else in creation for something, boom, coming from absolutely nothing. So everybody, regardless if you are a Christian or not, does fall back on there had to be an uncaused first cause.
A catalytic event.
Or a uncreated creator. Like somebody or something, if you're going to use the language of the world, there had to be some kind of force or some kind of material or some kind of matter that pre-existed for there to be things.
Anything.
And that's important for us to just identify head on. But then when people are critiquing the Bible, know that they also have to have the same kind of background to believe. Right. Because something can't come from nothing. Literally impossible. And there's people who are way smarter than me that don't believe in Jesus also say the same thing.
Right.
So you're like, I'm holding on to that. So when you kind of look at how God created, again, what's God creating or what's he trying to communicate?
Yeah, because what is that? I mean, I don't want to get away from that word, though, the create. Isn't that the one where he talks about function?
Yeah.
Because that's a huge piece of the puzzle, too.
Definitely.
It wasn't just that he used this term, because there was another Hebrew word that could have been used that was just meaning to create.
Yep.
But the word that was chosen in the text actually means that what's being communicated here, so this is the bottom of page 186, that bara, is that right? To communicate that he wasn't just making the heavens and earth, but he was designing them with purpose
intentionally
and with function. And so there was, kind of this twofold thing happening. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to make this, just because I can, but I'm going to make this with like specific purposes.
So if you flip over to 190 and 191, this is what I really appreciate about the creation accounts, because what he's about to do in the book is lay out the different theories.
Right.
This is one we don't do this very often, but here's one that I find most helpful personally. And why I say that, I also would change the title. On the top it says a literary artistic structure to 6 days, not a scientific structure. I don't necessarily like that because it alludes to this is some kind of only poetry or only like a fancy artistic writing, where I actually do believe it is historical. But what I like about this is he talks about how God formed kind of the arenas of life on the first 3 days. And then on the next 3 days, he filled them. So day 1, light and darkness. Day 2, sky and sea. Day 3, fertile earth. And if you were to imagine those in like number 1 up top, number 2 in the middle, number 3 on the day 3 on the bottom, if you just went to the right, then what did God fill those arenas with? So light and darkness, he filled with lights. of day and night, sun and moon, stars. Sky and sea go to the right on day 5. He filled them with birds and fish. On the day 3, the fertile earth, he filled with land animals, including man. And then day 7, obviously, he had rest. What I like about this, where he created the arenas of life and then he filled them, is that you are not pigeonholed into a timeline. Because there are, if you hold to the fact that creation was historical, which you have to, in my opinion, because Jesus did. He held to Adam and Eve being historical. He held to the fall being historical. Whether it was 6 literal days or 7 days or 6 years or whatever, I'm not going to fight you about this. Don't email me. You can hold that loosely and just get back to what is God trying to communicate here? Going back to this is who God is. He's creating with intentionality and purpose. And here we are.
Yeah, another thing that Dan kind of hits on too is he talks about this specific type of structure as something that brings order to chaos. And that's another attribute of God that we know that is who God is from beginning and for all time. Is he is someone that that brings clarity, not confusion. And he is someone that brings order and not chaos. And so that's another that just lines up with his nature too.
And so he takes the next couple of pages and kind of breaks down the different interpretations and different theories. And I remember a professor in college who was awesome and really kind to me, bringing up some of these points, going, how do we measure time? And when was the sun created? And how, and I remember for the first time going, oh, I need to sit down and rethink this, because there were major flaws in just at the time what I was thinking. And don't say I have all the answers now, but
it is so helpful though. Like Dan lays out, like, well, let's even just look at the word day. And, that's helpful to really break down that, like, sometimes we look at day and we mean like today. Sometimes we look at day and we do mean a 24-hour period. Sometimes we look at day and people use the phrase like, well, back in the day. And so just kind of the, the specific language that was used there too. And he talks about that within genealogies too. And
which is, in Genesis 5, like that's there. That's not a romantic, poetic kind of writing. That's historical. And it's important. Can I jump ahead to 207 if that's okay?
I'm with you. Wherever you go, I'm there.
Okay.
Okay.
You go,
what's up? 207.
What I appreciate about this is he talks about the serpent. How about that talking snake? And there, again, like everything else, there's different perspectives on this. He talks about what nechash is as a noun, a verb, an adjective. What I found interesting is, again, going back to Jesus. Now, he handled the scriptures, and that's how we're going to end this entire series. But Jesus viewed Adam and Eve as real people. He viewed the fall as a real thing, like a historical event. And the talking serpent, he breaks it down here. But what's interesting is that National Geographic, which is by no means a Christian biblical organization has come up with their own research. I read an article in 2016, you can type it in, how there are snakes out there that have leg joints but no legs.
Yeah, curious.
So now snakes slither on their belly, going back to the curse God gave them in Genesis 3. Also, there's research done by Rockefeller University and the University of Basel out of Switzerland. They're the first two, and there's a lot of other ones now that are tracing human DNA, finding that we did come from one man and one woman. So when the whole purpose of this chapter is going, is the Bible anti-science? We're actually finding out that no, it's not. And not only is it not anti-science, they complement each other in beautiful ways.
Yeah.
Right? And so when Jesus is talking in Matthew 19 or Mark 10 about divorce and marriage, he goes back to the creation account, Genesis 1 and 2, as that being a historical thing. Now, you also talk about Jonah, and people want to go, well, shoot, how'd this guy get swallowed by a fish or by a whale? Jesus handled that as a real event, because he's talking about his burial and his death for 3 days and then his resurrection. And again, people might say, well, I don't know if Jesus is necessarily, holding that as a historical event. The church has held to that belief for thousands of years. And a lot of people do hold to that belief that it's a historical event. And then we get through the scientific mind going, well, how is that possible? I don't know. How is the virgin birth possible? How is the resurrection possible? Like, to my brain, I'm like, I can't fully comprehend all these things, but there are so many other examples. How does God speak through a donkey in the Bible? Like, there are so many events. And then if you think through your life too, where we can't always fully comprehend and analyze and make sense scientifically of everything.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And I guess for me, I'm at a place where I'm okay with that. And I hope you listening are too, because when you look at these, they talk about the Y chromosomal Adam and the mitochondrial Eve, the one man and one woman that started humanity. Not Christian scientists. They're looking at human DNA, and we're seeing that this was a thing. So this is a fun read. This is a really fun read.
Yeah. And so I think Dan, what was so encouraging to me in this chapter was I think Dan did an awesome job of helping me understand that, my Bobby in 2021 is reading the Bible in a totally different way with a completely different perspective and lens than the Israelites right out of captivity. And so me putting myself in that story helps me meet the Lord in Genesis, and it helps me understand and have clarity. Because like Clark said, there is mystery, and there is us saying like, God, you could have created the world in 6 seconds.
I could have sneezed and you could
and so
Achoo.
The fact that he has taken such length and intention to use specific language and pictures to say, I want you, I created you to be in a relationship with you. That just encourages my heart to be able to release some of these questions and say like, okay, God, I'm understanding more of who you are, and I'm understanding more of why you created. And maybe I don't understand, a lot of the how, but it doesn't have to be an either or with science. We're seeing that it can be a both and. And in Christ, in Yahweh, with Holy Spirit's help, it is. And science is showing that now. And so, Clark, you wanted to say, like, another fun discovery with science has been dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs, yeah. I get asked this question, I bet, 5 or 6 times a year, and people want to know. So again, what were dinosaurs part of the intent of writing back to Moses? The answer is no. Like, that was not one of the questions he was trying to answer for us today.
Totally.
But with that being said, what do we do with that? Well, my own learnings here, dinosaur, the word itself, wasn't created until 1841. So as they do archaeology, and I'm not going to fight about the timelines of fossils because those are debated, and people have different theories on how old the dirt is and how old this lava is, and the spectrum's huge. So we're not going to fight about that. But what they are discovering is that many of the bones of the dinosaurs that they're finding have cancer and disease and arthritis in them. So what does that imply?
Right.
Well, in Genesis 1 and 2, God created everything and it was good.
It was perfect.
There was no sickness. There was no disease. That did not enter the world until the fall, Genesis 3. It wasn't like in Genesis 1, God created a dinosaur and the dinosaur's looking at Adam going, is that a chicken or what is that? I'm going to eat him. And then Adam got bit, It wasn't a thing because there was harmony. There was unity. It wasn't until after the fall that disease, bacteria, cancer that were detrimental came. So if dinosaurs were plagued by these things, it means that humanity and dinosaurs possibly coexisted at some point in time. Now, when you go to the Bible never talks about dinosaurs. That word wasn't used until 1841. But just like he used the word unicorn in a couple of chapters before, there are examples in the Bible where they talk about some creatures that are perplexing or confusing, right? So in Job specifically, which is the oldest book of the Bible, talks about the behemoth and the leviathan. Talks about how this animal would eat grass in Job 40, how its tail would swing like a cedar tree.
Yes.
So if you read today, people go, oh, he's talking about a rhino, or he's talking about a giraffe, or he's talking about a hippo. Bro, have you seen those animals' tails? Like, does the tail of a giraffe look like a cedar tree? Those things are huge. No, he's not talking about those things. So what's he talking about? I don't know.
Who knows?
Is it possible? Is talking about a dinosaur? Maybe. Same thing with Leviathan. What are they getting at? I'm not sure. So those are one of the things we can have fun with, and I think hold loosely. I'm not going to fight you about it. So again, don't email me. I won't respond. But it's like, wow, I wonder what happened. And someday we'll find out. But it's just, God's so creative. And again, when we get to read Genesis and see what is God really trying to communicate to the people as they left Egypt at this time.
Right.
It was written to them for us. I've actually grown to love God's word even more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I know. Thanks so much for following along, you guys. We're going to be back with you in section 5.
What
My God can beat up your God.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be a fun one.
Tune in next week. God bless you guys.
See you later.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his countenance toward you and give you his peace. Have a great day.